series for this school year. We rushed this one here in at the end because we felt like everybody might be feeling a little tension, a little stress. We thought we'd work it out, do some yoga tonight, and move on. Yeah. I'm Jen Walcott, and over here we have Terry Moore, and she and I are on the leadership of Decatur Parents Network. Terry, raise your hand.
Yay.
And then Joel is one of our newer members on the leadership, but he's been really helping us out, making sure we get these videotapes. For if you can't make something, we try to get them uploaded online, so if you can't make it. Decatur Parents Network, how many of you are confident you're actually signed in as a member on our website? You are a member of the Decatur Parents Network. Raise your hand if you're confident on that one. Or maybe you're just a contact in that system. You're going to be either one of those if you're receiving regular direct emails from Decatur Parents Network. Not something you saw on Facebook, not something you saw from the high school or middle school. You'll know you're either a contact or a member if you're getting that direct email from us. If you're not getting that and you want to, holler at us, because just signing in doesn't make that happen. You got to go in and do something online. It's not we never ask for money. We're not about money. We're just about building a network. I'm going to share one quick story because I really want the night to be about them. But we had a, 10th grade parents coffee sponsored by Decatur Parents Network this last Saturday. We had about 8 people or so there. One of them, we just always try to end those very casual coffees with, what more can DPN do for you? What do you want to share with us? What are we missing? And one thing we heard was the people that show up to these speaker things, the people on the leadership, we're all the goody people. And so some people are scared of us. So I want you to know, I don't fit into that goody thing. I've got 3 children. 2 of them have graduated from Decatur High School. I've had to send one to drug rehab. I've got one that didn't make it to college. One is finally starting at Perimeter. I'm paying up the wazoo for tutors right now. I need this more than anything. So we're not the drug police. We're not the alcohol police. I needed you to spread that message. We are here for the parents in Decatur. We're here to support you however that is, and we're not here to judge. So you need to help me get that message out, because I was pretty shocked when I had to hear that at a parent.
We're not the fun police.
We're not the fun police, no. So you heard about signing up for that. At the end, please fill out the survey we have. We'll get it passed out to you. But before you leave, just turn that in. Just turn it over. We need the feedback. We want to keep giving you what you need. So tonight it's about how you help your child manage the stress they may or may not be facing as they enter those teenage years, as they're working in school. I had somebody, did Laura Fears make it? She has a senior graduating, and she knows she's interested in those college years too. And so we're thinking we're going to be inviting these guys back several times throughout the school year. So this is all the way down to 6th grade up to, you've got kids already graduating high school. So you will be hearing more of them. But I want to introduce Dr. Cheryl Nahmias. She is the IB coordinator and instructional coach at the high school. She works in several areas in that high school, but one where we hear, or the rumors are out in the community, that IB degree diploma is the most stressful things and our kids aren't handling it very well. But she works with them, she knows them, and she's getting to hear their stories. She likes to spread that, but she likes to work with all students on helping them with organization and how you manage that stuff. And then Dr. Ken Jackson, I've been working with him as a school team counselor for years, since I've had all those children go through there. And we got to work a lot with DHS 101 in the earlier years when I told too much of my story. And so he's helped me get that down too. He takes my personal stories and makes some of these generic stories. But good stuff. We've been learning
with permission.
Yes. But he has seen lots of different programs go in and out of the high school and has always known how to be there to support the kids, and that's what he's there for.
Yay!
Thank you so much. I'd love to see exactly who is here. How many of you are currently middle school parents? How many of you are currently 8th grade middle school parents? Your kids will be coming up to high school next year. Okay. How many of you are currently 9th grade, 9th or 10th grade? And how many of you are currently 11th or 12th? And how many of you have middle school, high school, elementary school? We got them all across the board. We just have children.
Yeah, that's me.
Excellent. We're going to share with you a little bit about what we see with students and some ways that we approach students. Maybe we're on the same page and we have conversations with students. You can see, I do like my little pictures in there. And the purple one is the stress monster. And depending on your child, we'll play with sand and talk about the stress monster. So we want to give you some ways of approaching it, things that you can actually do. We designed this to be very, very interactive, so that you get to ask questions. So you're going to leave going, I know one or two things about how to support my child. Maybe I knew and needed to know again.
So I'm Cheryl. I'm the IB coordinator, instructional coach. I have a 5th grader, a 9th grader, and a 12th grader here in Decatur. So I have all of that. And while instruction and curriculum and that kind of stuff is really my focus and it's a passion of mine, in the last several years, something that's become a real passion of both of ours has been working with teenagers on how to just how to manage life and how to be healthier, how to be more balanced. And we feel like we have some real techniques that have helped some of our students, and so we're excited to share them with you all. Now, one of the things when you're a parent, this stuff is very personal, and a lot of times, especially if you have an N of 1 or 2, or maybe if you're lucky enough to have 3 children, it can feel a little isolating because it's like, is my kid the only one that's feeling this way? Am I the only parent who's feeling this way? So the way that we've set up this presentation, we're going to hand out, and I'm going to start to hand out this little quiz. This is a little self-assessment, and it has a series of statements. And all of these statements are things that we're going to talk about. They're sort of central to the things that we're going to talk about in our presentation. And what it's asking you to do is read the statement about your child and mark yes, no, or not sure. And what this is a silent activity. You do not need to share this, although at some point we may ask you to share. Here you go. Yes. But it's a chance for you to kind of think about some of the things that we're going to talk about in the presentation before we start talking.
If we have multiple kids, which one should we do
That's a really good question. I think maybe think about for yourself, in general. If there's one you're maybe particularly worried about, one that kind of drew you out on the school night. Or you can have 2 sheets. Or 3 sheets. Yes.
Who else needs something to write with? Does anyone else?
This should not be causing you stress. You don't get
Yes,
grade
this
on
is
it.
not a test.
Okay.
You good?
If you make 3 checks, you fail as a parent. No, that's not what's happening.
It's on a curve.
Are these the same as the dark green?
Test.
No, sorry. I was trying to keep it all. Okay, so now we're gonna test out this method. This is a method we use when we have like big groups of students and we want to kind of get their impressions or get their feelings about a topic or something like that. So you've got a red and a green card, and sometimes I'll ask you like, do you say yes or no? And I'll ask you to hold up green for yes, red for no. So if you're done filling out your self-assessment, show me a green. All right, so that's like kind of our way of keeping a bead. This is also meant to build in some solidarity. So like when I read out a statement like, my child is a perfectionist, and you can hold up a red or a green, and other parents can look around and go, oh yes, you know, I'm not the only one. Or, you know, things like my child studies in their bedroom. Yep. Or nope. So these things are just meant to kind of like, of course, don't hold up a card if it's something that you feel like you don't want to sort of reveal. But the intention is for all of us to kind of get a sense of like, where are we? What's sort of the norm in this room about habits of our children? So Ken is going to give you an overview of sort of the three big areas that we're going to touch on tonight about how stress is going to manifest in the life of an adolescent. But I want to make a quick caveat before that. The problems that we're talking about are not necessarily teenage problems. And this is what we talk to the kids about. These are human problems. Managing your time, finding balance, managing expectations, not having unrealistic expectations for yourself, setting goals, feeling like you've got a handle on your life and the demands of your life. They just happen to be their work and their life is a lot centered around school. They have a lot of other things in their lives too. But a lot of the problems that we're talking about are things that if we can help them learn these skills now, it really will help them just be better in the next phase of life, whatever that is, whether it's high school or college or job or all of those things.
So we will provide this PowerPoint for Terry to post. If you put your email over there, we'll email it to you, because we'll give you a lot of links and different things to look at later when you have more time. But when a student comes to me and they're talking about stress, after I help them to breathe, there are generally three areas that I have found that they tend to move into. And these three questions I found are important for me to ask. Is this a reframing issue? I'm just thinking about this incorrectly. Or is this something about which I have some control over? Or, real life, is this something that I need some resiliency so that I can endure it? When I get that in the right place, that's really going to help me to be able to help them to move on to that next space. So we're going to talk about things we can do in each of these areas, and some, and I'm so glad we're doing this, because actually students have said, would you please have these for my parents? I'm not kidding. And there's an 11th grade petition going around, funny petition going, would you please have one for my parents on how to navigate without stress the college process? I'm okay, but my mom is really up here. 5 different juniors have come up and said, so, you know, whatever. The first one is, do I need to reframe this? And I put up a couple of pictures. I do like this one. This one's so cool. If you put it up here, is he looking at you? You put it here, he's looking to the side. What do you see there? It's all a matter of the frame, yes, with some gestalt going on there. Do I need to change the way I'm looking at this particular thing? Because that is actually the issue. Before we get into some of the things about time management and all those things, that could be pretty significant. So we're going to do a little bit of yes-no kind of things and then talk about what that might mean.
Okay, so the questions that you answered related to this idea of reframing stress are these. So first one, I have actually sat down and had a discussion with my child about what my expectations are for grades, for achievement, for things like that. Show me a green if you have, a red if you haven't. Okay, so a lot of people have had that talk with their child. Second thing, I've actually asked my child to tell me what he or she thinks would be like a realistic set of expectations for them. Okay, so a few more reds in that one. So that might be some room for thinking. All of these are just kind of food for thought as we move through. Okay, next one. When my child is upset about something, I try to solve the problem. Okay, it's a mix. You know, like some of us are fixers. Oh, I know. Boom, I'm going to jump in with the advice. When my child is upset about something, I just kind of listen and offer empathy. Like, I know this is terrible, okay? My child is afraid of failure. Okay, this rings true to me. I see a lot of kids who are afraid of failure. And we have to kind of dig down, like, what exactly are you afraid of? You know, to kind of get at, like, what is the what? My child compares him or herself to others. For those of you that have a red, bless your children. That is the secret to a happy life. And if they've already figured that out, that's amazing. Because if there's one thing that I could wave my wand and just get rid of, it is every kid, any human comparing themselves to another person. I preach this to the children. I tell them all the time, it's this very natural human instinct to look and see what everyone else around you is doing. If we can get them to just focus on themselves and not this, that would be just a huge step forward for a lot of them in terms of their stress. I focus on my child's effort grades at least as much as on their academic. Oh, that makes me so happy. Okay, good. So emphasizing effort over just pure achievement, you know, just getting A's or just getting 6s. All right, so Ken is going to now kind of take some of these things, and at the end of each segment, we're going to give you some actual action steps. So if you said no to some of these where you think like, oh, maybe I should try to move towards a yes, or said yes where maybe you want to move towards a no, at the end of the segment, we'll give you like, here's some research, here's some things to think about, now here's some action steps.
A fun thing to do when we come back and do this presentation again is to have a curtain down the middle and have the students over here and the parents over here. My parents care about effort grades as much as they do about academics. Parents are holding up green and the students are holding up reds and going, maybe we need to drop the curtain and have a conversation over here. Because I tell you what I hear is not the flashing of green cards I just saw. Which doesn't mean that you're not telling them something. Your intent may be different than the impact they're getting. Two very different things. So there are 3 areas I want us to think about the reframing that we see coming up all the time. The first one, and I'll share a story. A student long graduated in her 3rd or 4th year of college, gone, happy life, wonderful. As I'm sitting with her in 10th grade, she was one of those, I gotta work harder, and she's having a great deal of difficulty in chemistry or AP history or something. And as we're talking, this is our 3rd or 4th conversation, so she trusts me a bit. And so your grade isn't going to be there, so what does that mean? And she said, if I don't make a good grade, my mother won't love me. Now, I knew that mother. I knew that mother's care and compassion. I know the relationship she ended up with her daughter in the senior year. But something was the way that child was interpreting it at that particular point. I have 2 YouTube videos in here that you need to go watch, both some TED Talks. This one we showed to our juniors and seniors, and it talked about the issue we have in our society when it comes to college applications. And we all think, if I have a good application, get into these good college, therefore I am now a good and worthwhile person. And the person actually said, and we parents, adults, sometimes think that. Good, perfect, go see the news and see what people were doing with their money, okay? Good application equals a good person, instead of flipping it. If I am a good person, treat people well, pursue my passions, really go with that, I will end up with that good kind of application. But we reverse that, and so our children begin thinking that I have got to be at this kind of standard. And Cheryl already mentioned the comparison with other people. They tell me that all the time. I'm on a secret campaign that's probably going to get me poo-pooed. I'm failing at it, but I will succeed before I retire, and that's to get the, on the high school transcript, to get the class rank removed from that.
Yes.
I'm losing,
No,
but
email the school board and
but
tell them
you
would
will
like that.
be, you know, we have now got it to people's attention where they're going to ask the stakeholders. Okay? I'm just saying, because that's comparison. I'm not talking about valedictorian, salutatorian, I'm talking about everybody else. I am a failure because I'm only number whatever. The other one is perfectionism. Some of your children aim at this and they're always going to aim at that, just get over it, that's what they're going to do. The challenge is, perfectionism means if I don't get that, I am therefore a bad person and crushed. When I go for exceptionalism, I'm aiming for this. When I don't get it, I'm sad, I learn, I'm discouraged, and then I move on. So we're not asking people to lower their standards. It's when I don't succeed, and colleges say we have to help your children not succeed in high school so they learn how to overcome those things, so when they get to college, they've learned that kind of resiliency.
So I have a quick question.
Yes.
I have the opposite situation with my son, you know, these paths of like, he'll say, I only need this to get my, he's very much, I don't want to do my best.
Very transactional sometimes.
Right,
I need to
so-
do this to get this. So a couple of
But
things
he's
are going.
capable of doing more, so how do we?
A couple of things, that's the reason we talked about, have that conversation about what is acceptable for me as a family. I know some students who actually aim at perfectionism, but it's scary, so I'd rather say I don't care and aim here, rather than admit that I tried and couldn't achieve it. So what we always see is, as you know with your children, I will tell you, particularly boys, when they say, how am I doing? You just say, fine. They ain't fine. Okay? I even say, is that a fine you tell your mother or a real fine? Yeah, it's not a real fine. And so they know that. They put up that wall. The other thing to reframe is what other people think of me. And that conversation, and we're going to talk about in another area, some ways of reducing that kind of conversation. But that would be a very good conversation with a child, which is why, I'm wondering why what you think, what she thinks about you is having so much importance in your life. Because then it sort of helps it come to the front where they can have these conversations. So, my worth, my relationships, but this one is really some pretty powerful stuff. How we think about stress. There have been some interesting research that if we think stress is bad, we know it causes heart problems and blood pressure and all these issues. And they did this long study, and they found out the people that had issues with it were the people that thought stress was harmful to them. People that reframed and said, this is getting my mind ready to work, it's getting their heart ready to work. They actually measured their blood vessels, and they found out when you're stressed, it does this. When these people thought it was good, they were equally stressed. Heart rate's going and pounding, but the blood vessels were like this. The way we see stress affects the way stress is going to impact us. They did another cool study. They took some people and said, you don't get to listen to this. We're going to give you a test. It's going to freak you out. You're going to be stressing. But here's the thing. We have found that if you get stressed out, it's going to make you answer the questions better. You're going to do this. They gave them all these reasons for it. But we didn't tell you that. Then we came in and said, okay, now let's do this test. And they were stressed. And they were recording, yep, my heart was beating fast, and I was having difficulty breathing. Then they found out how they actually did on the test. You people that thought stress was okay to feel that way actually did better on the test than the people that, when they felt this stress, they suddenly had this sense of panic. A panic attack, different from an anxiety attack, is a panic attack. I believe not only my heart rate is beating and everything, but because it is beating so much, I am going to die. I am not going to be able to breathe anymore because of this stress, as opposed to an anxiety attack, which is difficulty breathing, heart rate pounding. But when it crosses over to and because my heart rate is beating so much, I am now going to die, that's when it moves into a panic attack. Part of the long-term work we do in the counseling world is stress isn't bad. I did a conversation with 125 juniors, I guess, in history classes, and we talked about the saber-toothed tiger comes into the room. You want to have stress when there's a saber-toothed tiger in the room. That's a good thing. You're going to fight, flight, freeze. All of those can be good and or bad, but you're going to have a stress response. So part of the thing that is, how can we help our children understand this is happening? Now, how do we learn to manage it? And the other two areas we're going to talk about will give some of that. But the first thing is actually reshaping how we think about stress. I've helped teachers do that. So-and-so's taken a test. They're really stressed. What does that mean? I need to know, because that can be good or bad. So, now we want to do some action.
Yeah, let's do some strategies. Okay, so if anything of that sort of resonated with you, or you feel like there's some opportunity to reframe with your child, here are some things that we could do. Number one, just make sure that your child, in talking about stress, and I'm so stressed and I feel stressed, really understands that there's a certain amount of that in life. If you're going into a test and you're nervous, that's okay. If you're going to go on stage and you're nervous, or you're going in to play a game and you're nervous, that's okay. It's about how you manage it, and how you sort of think about whether or not that's bringing anything positive to the mix. Schedule a sit down with your child to talk about expectations and ask him or her to tell you about theirs. It seemed like where there were some people, it seemed like everybody's kind of communicated expectations to your children in some way, but the opportunity for them to just sit down and tell you, like, what's their version of what's okay. Listen non-judgmentally when your child's upset, and offer empathy but not a fix. I think that one of the things that happens, and as a mother, I know this, especially, I'm just going to say, especially with my daughter, she's my youngest, and when she's heard about something or something happens to her, I have this real visceral response, like, you just want to make it better. You want to, like, make the tears go away. You want her to, you immediately start with that talk of like, well, here's why that's going to be fine in 5 minutes, so I don't have to feel bad anymore because you're crying. But instead, just kind of being able to sit, just let them have the feeling and move through it and just listen non-judgmentally. And a lot of times what they need is just to listen and not the fix or the advice. And that allows them to see that, like, you can have a really bad feeling, move through it, and then be okay. And no one had to help you do it. We just were kind of there for you. Helping your child brainstorm solutions to their own problems. So sometimes, instead of offering advice, ask questions. Well, why do you think that happened? Well, what do you think you could have done differently? What do you think is really at the root of your stress? What are you afraid of? What do you think might happen badly if this thing goes badly for you? So instead of, giving solutions, helping them really think through some of their own problems. Encouraging healthy risk-taking. We talk about this. Our kids are afraid of failure. And oftentimes we have to just be able to say to them, like, it's okay, try something hard, try something you've never done. It's okay to fail at something. In fact, you're gonna fail at things, but we wanna actually encourage it as a way to learn. Discouraging your child from comparing himself to others. Now, I know that this happens because I hear this from parents. I've talked to a lot of you over the years. A parent will contact me and they'll say, my child told me that everybody, blah, 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 except for him. Or everybody got this grade, except for him. Or, it's always everybody. So every child has done a comprehensive evaluation of everyone else. What that really means is they talked to a few kids near them, whoever was close by, and they immediately started comparing. I was in my junior CAS advisement. Some of your kids are in my CAS advisement. And we got our PSAT scores. And I had them all in a stack. And it had their little score sheets with what they got wrong and whatever. And they're all like chomping at the bit to get these things back. And I said, before I hand these out, I'm just going to say, what am I going to say? And they're like, comparison is the thief of joy, like they And I'm like, so, before I give these out, is there anybody in here that thinks that any good is going to come of comparing your score to anyone else in this room? Convince me. No, like they can't think of anything. And so I'm like, okay, I will give these out if we agree as a group, no one is going to show your score to another person. I can't stop you once you're outside this room. But while we're in here, we're just going to look at our own. We're going to look at what we got right and wrong. We're going to think about things and whatever. And they're like, I gave them all out. The 3 boys that sit right here, of course, immediately ignored everything I said. Not because they disrespect, they just don't listen. I'm like, no, remember what we said. But this is a very real thing. Their immediate impulse is to compare and share. So when you're at home, well, how can you influence this? When you're at home and they're telling you everybody and this and that, and I've done a comprehensive study of all of the juniors at Decatur High School and I can be assured of this, just kind of like take things with a grain of salt and help them reframe. It's not everybody. Think about where you are, think about where you want to be next, and let's focus on you and not on everybody else. And then finally, obviously, we prefer that you really applaud effort, and really kind of positively reinforce effort. What Ken's saying is true. Kids will tell us, oh, our parents care so much about this. And I know parents. I mean, some parents who are my personal friends, and I know for a fact they're not sitting around well, you better bring me an A, you know, like that's just not, but it's in the ether. It is in the ether. And one thing I'll tell you about, especially a smart kid, is in the absence of you telling them what is, they will make something up. They will fill the void with perceptions that they get from TV and movies and what they hear other kids say. And when we're talking about college and we're talking about the future, whatever, they will fill that story in with how you feel or how they think you feel. So don't trust your kids to make up the story about how you feel about them and achieving these things. Just tell them. Like actually have the conversation and tell them often because they forget. You know, because they're hearing a lot of mixed messages sort of out in the community. So these are, and I file all of these under simple, not easy. There's lots of really simple things in the world that we can do. Simple and easy are not the same thing. So at the end of tonight, we're just going to ask you to think about what are like a couple of these that in the end I could take away and just kind of try with my child. Okay.
So I'm going to give like 15 seconds of reflection and breathing. If there's some of these that you think may be sort of interesting, you can just make a note. We'll be able to come back to that.
There are books on each of the states.
Yes. Terry didn't give us a big enough budget. This is where you need to take a break at the lodge we're in, and you need to walk along the beach and think about these things, and then come back after an hour-long beach walk, and then we continue. So we'll assume that you've been on the beach.
Plan for
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
retreat.
Yes. Okay, so the first one is this something that needs to be reframed? The next one would be, is this something that I have control over any part of this particular thing? Do I have control? And we're going to give you like 4 of our favorites that tend to come up in a minute. But first we want to do just a little bit of, does this apply to you or does it not apply to you? But you and your child.
Okay, so this is what I do with students in groups, individually, sitting down to plan with them all the time. And so these really are like the key things around how can you manage your time and your studies outside of school the best. All right, so my child studies or works in his or her room, yes or no? Okay, this is going to be one, folks, that I'm going to say, file it under simple, not easy. If you can get your child out of his or her room, that's critical. Don't let them study in their bedroom. There's tons of research to suggest that they're ruining both their sleep and their work by studying in the place where their body and their brain saying like relax and chill out. And if they want to be focused and clear and able to just complete their work in a really just easy way, mixing it in the bedroom. The other thing is when the door's closed and they're in there with their phone and their computer and whatever, you don't really, you're like, they're studying 3 hours a night. Are they? And I say that, like, we really can't know what we can't see with our eyes. So I'm really going to advocate pushing them out to a dining room table or a study table, having them study at the same time each day, keep it in the daylight. The more they can complete before it gets dark, that's a goal, to just kind of sit down. And I'll give you a couple other tips, action steps about how you can help them accomplish this. But first and foremost, move them out of their bedrooms. Okay, my child studies works with his or her phone or other devices close by. Yes, okay, this is another one. They have got to put the phone away. This is as bad as any drug. Well, okay, it's maybe not as bad as any drug, but this is a serious thing. I want us to take this seriously. It's an addiction. It's something that is driving a lot of the negativity, a lot of the bad emotions, and when you're talking about just managing time, even if it's, so this is what I tell kids, go to your study spot, not in your room, set a timer, like an egg timer, or set the microwave timer so you can hear it go off for a certain amount of time, half an hour, 15 minutes, study hard, focus. Take your phone, take it in the next room, put it in a drawer, and close the drawer. Like you're metaphorically killing it, like putting it to death. And then you go into the next room, you focus, you study hard for a short amount of time, and then you come back to this, and you reward yourself by making sure that nothing in the world really changed while you're away. And then you put it back in the drawer, you come back. Now, if your child is a child who studies with all their devices and they study in their room and they seem to be managing just fine and they're getting the results they want, their lives are balanced, I'm not saying that these things are like, you know, they have to do this or they won't be successful. I'm saying if you're seeing your kid doing a lot of like spinning out, staying up till 2 a.m., whatever, a couple of simple switches like this can really help you get a sense and help them get a handle on that study stress. Now, what Ken will tell them, because a lot of them will say, well, I have it right there beside me, but I don't look at it. That the effort that they're using to not pick it up is actually draining some of the focus and some of the willpower and attention that they have to focus on their study. So when we say, go put it in the next room, go put it in the next room. Yes?
This is a thing, I mean, everything is online, all their work is online, all this Google, and I hate that.
Yeah,
They're
it's-
like, I can't do my work without my tablet. or I can't.
So I completely hear you. This is really a thing. So what I'm gonna say is nothing, so simple and easy. Nothing is that clear cut. If you can have them on like a Chromebook or some kind of device where they're like in Google Classroom, whatever, a lot of things are done online. They write online, they do research online. This though is a separate thing. If you have a situation where the only device your child has is this one to do their work on, at the high school we have like homework Chromebooks they can check out and bring home. You know, like I really think this is a special kind of devil. So get rid of it. And then if they still need to use another kind of device, then I think having them at a dining room table where you're cooking dinner and you can see quite clearly that they're either playing Clash Royale or they're doing their assignment, you know, it's a little bit more easy to monitor than this thing. Okay. My child spends hours at night studying. Okay, my husband's back there, he's like, I wish. That's our 9th grader. So our 12th grader's pretty much figured it out for himself, but we have, you know, another one we have to actually parent. So if your child is spending hours at night, here's where I really want you to know that I have some expertise that probably no one but Ken and I have this. We've sat down with literally tens, now into the hundreds individually, of students who over the last 4 or 5 years have gone through the IB diploma, which is the most rigorous, you know, program of study you can do at Decatur High School and probably in most schools. And the kids who play sports and do the diploma, who are in the theater group and do the diploma, who have outside passions like horseback riding, everything you can imagine. And we sit down with them to plan out their studies, like down to the minute, how much time they're going to spend on every test, every essay, every project, whatever. And when they give us enough time, where they come in and we do a 2-week plan, and they give us enough time to actually plan for it, there isn't a single night that I can't get your kid in bed, done, by 7:30, 8:30. There does not need to be this, you know, leaking into the late night. And in fact, that's really unhealthy. They're not learning anything. It's not productive. They're not, I would guess 99.9% of the plagiarism cases we've seen come from some kids sitting in the dark late at night, 2 a.m., night before papers due, desperate, you know, like this. So our whole goal is to teach kids the difference between, my method that we've kind of honed is to teach them the difference between do and do. They all know when things are D-U-E, they write it in the agenda, and then they forget about it until the day before. Or 2 days before. So what I do is we look at all the DUEs and then we map out the DOs. Well, when are you going to actually DO all this? And we look at their sports and like what else is going on. And when they actually just sit down and put it all in one place, it's manageable. It's when they just kind of let it leak around the edges and they don't really sort of get a handle on it that it becomes really overwhelming and stressful. So this whole thing about my child spends hours a night studying, if that's your child and he or she is at the high school, have him or her email us and we'll sit down with them and sort of just teach them. Like, this is how you map out your time to get control over it. Okay, my child studies with other people. Okay, I see a lot of reds. This studying with other people is a great thing to do. And this is something we try to encourage students to do. So one thing, how many of you you probably all learned to actually study at some point. But back when you were in high school, before you knew how to study, how many of you thought like running your eyes over your notes for hours at a time, that was studying? Like that's how you study. Or highlighting. Highlighting everything. If I make it all green, it's going right in there, you know? So like a lot of us were kind of brought up to think that if you just sat for hours and hours and hours and just highlighted and you took all the things that you wrote verbatim and just read them again and again, well, there's been a lot of research into what real studying looks like. And the book on studying is if you're not actually testing yourself the way that you're going to be tested, meaning you're not making yourself retrieve information, you're constantly going to be caught in that loop of, I sat for 3 hours and read over my notes, and then I got in the test, and nothing came out. It wasn't there. Well, because they've never locked it in. So the method that we really encourage with students is this distributed practice. Study a little bit at a time, over time. Study with other people. Because if you have someone else quizzing you and saying, explain to me this biology concept, explain to me how this Civil War went down, and you can explain it to another person, that's a great study technique. And teenagers are naturally social creatures.
Is it okay if they do that on FaceTime?
I think it is.
Yeah, okay.
I think it is. I think anytime you can encourage your kids to be in the room with real live people, that is a good thing. And I'm really being serious about that. Like if you look at like these studies, like the Harvard Men's Health Study of long-term flourishing, like looking across all these different variables, and what it came down to is like people's relationships with other people. So if you can get your kid in a room with 2 other real children studying, that's actually great on a lot of levels. It lowers their stress, it's more fun, they feel less resentful, it gives them that social component, and it really holds them accountable because they can't kind of trick themselves into thinking they have it. So this strategy of getting them to have study groups really packs a lot of punch because it helps in a lot of different areas with just like, you know, collaboration and friendship and a sense of solidarity, and it really works as a study strategy.
Sure, can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
sure.
So my son's a senior, and we moved here when he was in 8th grade. And is there anywhere in the process in Decatur schools where they really learn study skills?
That's a good question. So we have now started taking it on as like a real thing in different classes. So the way that we do things at the high school, because now our classes are around 400, 350 to 400. If you want to do something systematically, the way you do it is you choose a class. Like we're going to go into all the history classes in 10th grade. So like I go into all the 9th grade classes in 9th grade and teach about academic honesty and plagiarism. And when I teach about it, I don't teach the rules. I teach the rules, like here's what it means to plagiarize, whatever. What I teach them is about the psychology of it. Like, why would you plagiarize? What are the factors that are more likely to make you want to cheat at something versus doing it the right way? And how can we guard against those things? Like really acknowledging that it's a thing that on any given day, people might be tempted depending on whatever. So like that, reading strategies, note-taking strategies, we go into individual classes and we'll just teach it to like a whole grade level in a class. But recently, because we've gotten kind of good at this with individual kids, like we just did some after-school sessions that kids could sign up for and come to the library and just learn. Now, a passion of mine that I want some students to tackle it is to really have students organize study groups, like by grade level. So one of the tips, and I don't know if it's in the action steps that I'll give you, but a tip that we give students is if you know you have 3 things to do at home tonight, you got some math homework, you're going to work on this TOK presentation, and you've got this. Stay here, go to the library, and do one of the things before you leave the building. Or meet your friends at the library, study for bio, that's done, and then go home. Or, better yet, if you know there's bio tutoring, go and do your homework in bio tutoring, and then there's lots of people around. If you do have a question, your bio teacher's there. You know, so just giving them tricks to like get around other people, you know, and kind of make that happen. But I do think that if you say to your children, is there anybody in your bio class, let's say that's the area they're struggling, is there anyone in your bio class that you would want to study with? They can usually go, yeah, there's this kid, he's really nice, I like him, he's my friend. And then just suggest it. like, hey, let's invite them over, or you guys go to Kavarna and I'll pay for coffee and have a study session, but just getting them into like the idea of studying together. Yeah,
So you went a little quick on the, how many hours they should be studying. You said they can be done by 7:30 or 8:30 or whatever, but how many hours per day in a 7-day week are you talking about?
so a typical, like, I sit down with a kid for a 2-week thing, and depending on what we have on the agenda, let's say they're writing a written task 1, they've got a test to study for bio, whatever. What we do is we start with a piece of paper, and I'm just gonna demonstrate this. We put all their classes across the top. So it'll say like Ben's classes, and we'll put all the classes. Then under each class, we write what's DUE, what's coming up. And we put it all on there with the due dates. Then the next step I do is I say to kids, how much time do you estimate you're gonna spend finishing this paper, finishing this presentation, studying for this test, studying for math every night? And I make them put the amount of time. Then we come down here and draw a DO calendar, and we actually take the time and we start with the most urgent, whatever's due first, and we come down here and we say, well, if it's due here, then we have this day and this day to DO it, and then they break out, oh, I need 2 hours for it, I'm gonna work from 4 to 5 this day, and from 5:30 to 6:30 this day. We actually write the appointment for when they're gonna do it. So when you break it down that way, depending on what kids are doing in a week, it depends on the kid. Some kids can sit down and crack out a paper in 2 hours. Some kids it takes 4 hours. So it a little bit depends on the work and the student, but what I'm saying is across all kids with all different subjects and all things going on, if they start early enough, if they wait until the last minute, it looks crazy. It's like, it looks no better than, it's just a paper manifestation of the crazy that they've let build up in their lives. But if they start early enough, you can spread stuff out over weekends, you can study Saturday and Sunday morning and still have the rest of your day, and really spread it out. So I guess I could go and kind of like add up all the time, but it really kind of varies by child. But what I'm saying is, it's rare for me to find a child that I can't keep it, reasonable. If they're really being serious, and we say time, when we're talking about this time, we're not talking about studying in your room, devices going, whatever. We're talking about focused, sitting, focused on nothing else but that task at hand. And that's a very different kind of studying. I had a question here, yeah.
You mentioned earlier the setting of the timer and then taking a break. How long do you think is the best time to study before taking that break?
Okay, so this is a great question. This is the way we break it down for kids. There's a big difference between trying to create something from scratch and trying to learn something or retain something. If you're trying to retain or learn something, studying for more than about an hour at a time, you start to get diminishing returns. Because just nothing else is going in there. You have to take a break. You have to let yourself sort of have some time. Half-hour chunks, 45-minute chunks are really kind of ideal for like trying to study and retain material. If, however, you're trying to write a paper or a project or something where you're creating something out of nothing, for those kind of assignments, you typically will need longer blocks of time where you can get yourself going and then keep going. Like if you've ever tried to write a paper, if you tried to break it up into like 15 or 30-minute chunks of work, you'd just be starting every time. You never, kind of advance. So it depends on the assignment. But if it's studying, the ideal is to do distributed practice across time. Like let's say you have a bio test in 2 weeks, do 20 minutes a night of hard study over time. That adds up. In the end, you'll have studied 3 hours. If you try to study 3 hours the night before, no bueno. It's going to make you tired and anxious, and nothing's going to go in there. If you do it 20 minutes at a time for 2 weeks, and it adds up to 3 hours, that's ideal. So it really is about spreading things out into smaller, and I tell kids when they're coming up with their time increments, use increments of 15 minutes. A hard 15 minutes of studying beats a distracted 45 minutes every day. Like it really does. A distracted 45 is just a distracted 45. Just a really focused 15 can really help them, especially over time. Yeah?
Do they have a clue as to how long something is going to take?
No, this is another thing. They have no sense of time. They really don't. Like I'll be in classrooms and I'll say, okay, you've got 2 minutes to write, and I have this rule where I'll say, put your pen on the paper and write, and do not stop writing. Do not take your pen off the paper until I tell you to stop. And here's your prompt, or here's your whatever, go. Kids will write for like 2 minutes. And then they'll have this half a page of, almost a page of writing, and they'll just be like, my God, that was 2 minutes. I was like, right, like it's longer than you think, right? It's like they, just playing with time. So I think setting timers is incredibly important. That's also when they need to learn to stop. Because some of your kids, the perfectionists, they have this internal metric that none of us have ever seen. It's somewhere between a 7 and a 7+. And that's the world they live in. And they need to learn to know when to say when and know when enough is enough. So a timer is a really powerful tool for, like I said, I was going to study for 30 minutes. It went off, I'm stopping. And I'm moving on to the next thing. So timers are great just for learning time and how to manage it so it doesn't become your enemy. Let's see, anything
Yes.
else there? Nope.
So to answer your question about, do we teach it to them? Yes, no, and maybe. So, I'll give you an example. Junior lacrosse student came into my office, one of the 95 we met with one-on-one, and it was, my grades are decent, okay, but I'm moving to lacrosse season, and I've already studied till 10:30 at night. How is this going to happen? And I looked at him a little shocked. I go, why are you still doing this? I would have quit a long time ago if I had studied that long. Can we work with you? Sure. So we did the 30 or 45 minute, exactly DUE, how much time, put it down, came up with a 2-week plan, put in his conditioning he needed to do, put in the things, and he was finishing 7:30, 8. And he looked at many students have looked at us and basically said, you're a witch. That time did not exist before and exists now.
They think we're brilliant. It's so funny.
What I have not said to one of them, and this is a testament to my great moral character, okay, great character, is all of those students we did this training with at the beginning of the junior year and presented it to every single one of them in a trapped room at Georgia State and went through, this is what you need to do, this same method. But when they got into the mess and it wasn't working, like, I will listen to you, I will do it. He emailed me a couple weeks later about a Spanish something or other. He goes, well, by the way, that method of time, it is working. Okay,
Yeah.
Great, you've discovered it. You have a secret. I learned to do that my senior year of college. Okay, I was the green highlighter, run around, just get her done kind of stuff. So if we can teach them that when they need it. So we've taught students going to the diploma program next year, we offered it to all of those students. But when they need it is the time. So when parents say, shall I start? I say, give them 6 weeks. If stress is down here, grades are up here, effort's up here, let them do whatever they're doing. Okay, don't know why it's working, but stress, grades, effort. But when these don't meet the family conversation about where we should be, now we need to start going into one of these plans. We have found that most of the procrastination or late hours are from a time management. And we talk about how to reward yourself and delay gratification and all those things. But many of our students are carrying around everything in their heads,
Yep.
and that is so much stress to put on there. Some of them, when they just put it down, go, it's all down there. It's ugly, it's messy, but I can get it all done, and it's out now. I saw a hand over.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So that time scenario you just described really involves a kid who has an after-school activity, does that activity every day or several
Yes.
days a week till
Yeah.
5 o'clock?
It is essential
5
for
o'clock,
that kind of student.
Goes home, gets their work done, and they eat dinner at some point during
Yes,
that time?
because, well,
We ask them for every day,
This
when are you gonna do
particular
it, when
student
is dinner, when is
had his workout, and so he was, from 6 to 8, they had the field. He wasn't getting home, and I said, you get home, you're probably gonna stink, and you're hungry, and you're gonna eat, and you have about 30 minutes worth of homework left in you that particular day, because it's your late day. Yeah, I said, good. Where are we gonna put that time ahead? Because it's a 2-week plan. So he said, well, I've got to do a little bit on Sunday afternoon, or I've got to put a little bit of it here, rather than it just appears, and now it's Tuesday, and I get home at 8 o'clock, and I shower and eat, and I've got this 2 hours worth of homework to do, instead of taking it and putting it,
We put a heart over Friday. No one works on Friday. So we never let them work on Friday on the calendar. Like, that's your day to just leave this place and go do your thing. And then we look at every day of the week. We look at what they have to do. And the trick is, if you start early enough, you can always find the time. The longer you put it off and it's imminent, then there isn't as much time. Like but they really see that. Like they see that through the process. The other thing that we discover occasionally is there are kids who are totally overbooking themselves.
Yes.
100%. And sometimes we have to have talks and say, that's actually not really doable.
No. I had a student, she
What
came
you're trying to
in,
do
she's
here.
talking about her stress. I have 6 IB classes. I'm president of a club. I'm involved with another club. I am in a varsity sport, and I work part-time 3 days a week. And I go, well, I have my Harry Potter wand here, but beyond that, there's nothing I can do. We have to figure out, okay? And for her, it was the more I do, the more value I have, rather than how do I make some choices about that. I've also found my varsity athletes and marching band 11th and 12th graders, when they get good at managing their time, they're usually really great during season. And then when they have all that sudden free time and season's over, then it just falls apart because I got 3 hours I didn't have before, and now it's crash and burn, rather than maintaining that do her, get her done, and then move on. Cheryl already talked some about this study habits. We have really found, I was looking at the grad school suggestions, and they were talking about 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, but very, very focused. I got to keep coming back to this, and students see me and they glare at me, and they did a study where a group was sitting eating dinner and their phones were on the table, okay, and then their phones were away. They found if the phone was even on the table and not being used, those people had less communication, they were picking up on fewer visual cues, they were not actually bonding. I don't know if we're just having to say it's there, what's going on, what's down there, I don't know what's going on. We didn't do the why yet. But we do know that there is a high distractor. We've had seniors, when they finally learn, come into our offices and leave their phones of their own volition in our desk drawer and say, that thing is controlling me all day long. Yep. And I'm going to skip to the last one. If you want to reduce stress in your child, I will say the constant input of information that they're getting, I can give you study after study, and I even give you a link at the end to read a short article. We do know that the rise of anxiety is related to the constant barrage of information. Good information, bad information, and then I'm going to say something that will make you glare at me, so look at Cheryl when I say this, okay? The children do what we do, okay? It is, a lot of that going on. And so it is difficult for me to, be answering a text on my phone when they're in my office and then tell them, and you're using that phone too much. It's just, a problem there. So I will tell them, and by the way, folks, I'm not the anti this. For many of them, that is their community, that is their bonding, that is the way they connect with other people. For many of them that don't feel connected any other way, this is a good connection. I'm certainly not against it. I'm simply saying that we have not given them, talk about no training on time management, we've given them no training on how to actually use it and when to use it. So that's a separate, call us in one night and we've got a whole bunch of stuff to do, but that is a big area for just navigating stress. Where do you think the comparisons come along? The relationship issues, a lot of it is just reinforced there. So Cheryl actually went through a lot of these now, but let's go to maybe the action steps.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
yes.
one question. So seeing as you've seen the success with the IB students and sitting down and having that with them before the school year, is that something there's been talk about bringing it to all students in some capacity, or at least offering it for them to come to after school or before school?
Yeah, so we don't just, I coordinate the IB program, but I work with all the students.
I work with
Probably one of the groups that I spend the most time with through parent referrals are 9th grade boys. Because if you've ever had one, they're a particular kind of mess. Just like internally disorganized and just kind of, yeah, right. You're just like, preach. So that is the question though, like how to kind of scale it up and teach other teachers. So the conversation we had about next year was basically teaching it in advisement. So like we train the teachers and we've kind of like honed this method to the point where for us it's so intuitive, talking it with the kids. So really figuring out how we can teach people to sit down and do it with kids in a way that, because it isn't the same when you do it in a group So
Yeah.
we've been doing these after-school workshops where you do it in a group, but a lot of times kids will come back and be like, I just can't quite do it myself. I need like 1 or 2 times to sit with somebody, so we just need to get more adults.
And this, I'm not committing you to this, but some students and a family I spoke with in the past weeks, and when I explained this, they said, would you teach us as parents how to do it so we could sit with our child every Sunday and plan out and
Yeah.
do the next 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Would that be something you would be interested
Yes.
in teaching
Yeah.
Put it
how
on
to
the
do?
evaluation, that
Okay,
way.
Yeah.
great, yes, okay.
Justify this.
I'm gonna have to, because I think it's so clever.
We
Do
talked
versus
about putting
do.
our jobs and just going on the road.
And I'm like, I've never
marching
seen this, so I
how
probably
to
need to
magically
trademark
create
that.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really works.
Quick question. I had the privilege of going on the IB trip to Georgia State, so I got to see it in
Yes.
action. I saw the balloons in the air.
Yes.
Both mine are like wishing I would have never seen or heard any of this information. But where I struggle with is that letting them fail, or how much control do I have over them? So grades are decent, stress is high, not doing this plan, telling them this plan doesn't really work for them, but they're not doing it, so how do they know whether? I know it sounds funny to say, is it okay to make that a necessity? Like, this is what we're gonna do, you have to do this every other Sunday. I wanna see it on
First,
paper.
I would say, yes, but.
Okay,
This is a conversation to have at the beginning, before it's there. Like, as a family, this is where we have to see your effort or grades. Okay, I would recommend effort, okay? And this is where I have to see your stress. I'm okay with this, but I want to see this. If I see stress constantly up here and effort down here, then I need to step in and we're going to need to do another plan. Now, I'm going to give you X amount of time, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, but we're going to revisit it. And if, based on this, stress is down here, and effort, and therefore grades are up here, I'm gonna let you keep bundling along because it's working. Don't break it if it's working. But if it's not, then we need to step in. And there is that art between, we don't want to rescue them because they've got to see it's not working. That's the reason we were successful with 90 or 95 students that came in, because they were broken.
They were ready.
Yeah,
Okay,
they were
ready.
ready here.
But, on the other hand, we can't let them, so I always recommend to families, come up, this is the time period, this is what I need to see, it's a job evaluation. And you're gonna have your mid-year evaluation, except do it in 6 weeks. This is where it needs to be, and then there's that conversation. They'll be frustrated, but you've already talked about, this is what we're going to be doing with that.
And I think there's a couple strategies we're gonna give you that would actually help with, like, really practically how to help with that,
To do
that very
that.
thing. So, I've emphasized,
But I'm gonna give you a chance to write, if you wanna write down, a lot of you have been taking notes, but if any of these, I think we went through, but if any of these we didn't get, that you didn't write down, but yeah, I'd like to use that, you may want to, add that to your list.
if you're gonna do any of these, I really recommend the top 2 as things that you consider, if those are things that your child's not currently doing. Don't study in the bedroom, and never study with your phone.
But if my son's doing that, has his devices, has his TV, and has his laptop, all of them, he seems to be making decent grades. Like,
Yep.
do I say we can't do this anymore, or do I,
Again, stress,
he has no stress.
and
It's all on
he's
you,
not
right?
showing you any stress.
He's not showing me he's trying, he's more like, well, I just need this to get this.
Yeah, I mean, I have my son who's graduating right now is like, Mom, I'm gonna ride the low 6 and enjoy my
That's why
life.
he's like more like 5, and he sleeps,
And you know what?
but
It was okay. I mean, there were times when I was like, but you could, but he just handled his business. And so I was like,
he's like, I want to be with my father. Like,
And I give you permission to let him be happy.
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
If it's
I
in
actually
this
think that's
range.
okay.
Like the myself, I mean, he's doing his
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, if he feels like frustration, or he feels like, wow, I'm so close, like, if he's at 5s and he could move a couple of them to 6s, and he's like, you're like, well, maybe you could try studying with a group, or maybe you could try, like, these are all things that you could use in moderation. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yes.
So is the school open after, so they can stay and study? Because it used to be, when my son was there, that unless you were part of a club, they
Yeah.
scooted you out and they did not want you there. But now,
It's open till 5 o'clock,
Yeah, so
Monday
they
through
can stay
Thursday.
Yeah, they can stay till 5.
And the library learning commons is open. That's separate from a teacher who may be in the room, and
For
they can go there
tutoring.
and do the tutoring or do the bio homework in the room where the teacher is. But the library opens at 7:30 in the morning and it closes most days at 5 o'clock.
So what drives most of your children, especially your boys, out of the school building at the end of the day is oftentimes hunger. They're starving. And they cannot wait to get home or Chick-fil-A or wherever they're gonna get a snack. So if you are gonna encourage your child to stay after school and hang out and study, send them with a snack.
I really thought it wasn't available.
No, it is now. I mean, we've really worked to say, now we also have something called Saturday School. And some of your children may have availed themselves, voluntarily or otherwise, of Saturday school. And it is a series of Saturdays where they're 3-hour blocks from 9 to 12 where kids will come in. And there are teachers there and people, to work with them on their senior project or the written task 1 or to retake a math test. So they're also, this year I think we started them in November. DEF funded them, which was amazing. And I think we had 8 or 9, we're having our last one May 11th. So that's another place where kids can come and just have some more structured time when they're struggling to just get things done, especially longer range things that take a couple hours to complete.
So we really work with them to try and work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
To be much more efficient than if you have a big paper coming up in 2 weeks, a way to save yourself 2 hours worth of time is to go spend 30 minutes in the writing center that first day, just to make sure you understand what you're doing, get a senior or the teacher to re-explain it, your brain's going, and you've saved yourself all that time down the road.
Yeah. 99% of your kids, whether they'll admit it to you or not, we poll them, will completely own being a procrastinator. That's being a human. If you're not a procrastinator, that's exceptional. And so that's because you've somehow learned to get ahead of it. And that's what we're trying to do is just take their procrastination and help them get ahead of it and just, be a little more forward-thinking. And that really lowers the stress a lot.
I want to get to the one last section and we'll
Yep.
get there. So finally, are there times that they simply must, that didn't come out well, they must learn to endure it, to be resilient? There are times when that occurs, so you can go
Yeah,
through these.
okay.
and I'll
So
explain
just quickly, my child has healthy habits, sleep, exercise, they eat well.
it. Greens, reds.
Mix. This is a hard one. It's hard to make them do the right things when they're older, okay? Has long range and short-term goals. Okay, so a
A
mix.
nice mix.
I try to teach my child to work through a problem rather than giving them an answer. Okay? My child has a regular source of recovery or strength that helps them. So anything where they get energy from their music, their friends, their arts, something that they really enjoy doing. Okay? My child has the words to express how they're truly feeling.
Oh, they have words.
My child has accurate words.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes, a range of vocabulary rather than this sucks. Okay. And my child and I get together for no other purpose than to be together, no talk of school, on a regular basis. Okay, that's really nice. I know my husband's maybe a little bit, because one of our kids, it's we always just feel we got to get that in there. And it's hard, to just be nope, we're just going to be and just enjoy each other and not think about school and not talk about school and those kinds of things. My child can name 3 things they feel they're really good at.
That's great.
That's great. This is something to really think about. What do they feel like they're good at? Can they name it? Can they identify their strengths as well as what they're trying to improve on all the time? Okay.
I have a question on the no other purpose. So if they're in the IB program and they're in a sport or they play in the band or whatever, for one, they don't really ask questions about your day. So it's, they don't usually.
No.
At some point they will, I hope, but generally, right, it revolves around them.
Right.
Yep.
So there's not often other things to talk about.
Yeah.
So that, it just would be interesting. So I reach with Sophie, I'll be like, so, that was an interesting song you were listening to. And she's like, So I don't know if that's have tips. I mean, she's sometimes super talkative
Yeah,
when there's something that she wants to share, but that is like pulling teeth.
yes.
And so we default to asking how school is because they do that all day. That's what they do right now.
And when our son, our ninth grader was in middle school, and we would say like, how was school? He would say, I just had to live through it for 8 hours. Why would I want to recap it for you? I'm like, that's a fair point. Like, I don't really want to talk about my day either with, whatever I was doing. So a couple things that will give us strategies. One thing is, and I just read a really great article about this, and it's one of those counterintuitive things. Don't you think everything that you've ever thought was a brilliant parenting move was completely counterintuitive? Right? Like when you hear some trick or something, you're like, oh my God, that's the opposite of what I would think to do in the moment, but it's so brilliant. And one of the things was, you were just talking about music, but like those of us who have kids who love to play Clash Royale, or they're super into some television show or whatever, is to just sit and actually like explain this game to me. Let me watch this show with you. I'm just gonna sit and watch this stupid anime. I actually don't think anime is stupid, but you might. So I'm gonna sit and I'm just gonna watch with you, and we're gonna sit side by side, not confrontational, face to face, and we're gonna talk about stuff, and I'm gonna let you explain something to me that is important to you. And that's a way to just kind of get talking, and it's just very counterintuitive because, who wants to do that? Like you're trying to get your kid off the game, but like to lean in and just kind of embrace something that they're into and use that. The other thing that we will talk about as one of our strategies is taking walks. Like if you walk and you're side by side, it gets them out, it's a great stress reliever, but they're not like looking you in the face. They're just kind of walking side by side, and they will talk and they will relax, and they'll kind of like, and then you can talk about what you just saw on the news, or, just kind of pull in. And sometimes I think you actually have to think ahead about something you could talk about, like something that you read or something you find interesting, or ask them some more open-ended questions. Because I know these things. And in the moment with my own children, how was school? It's just, you're tired.
So I'll tell you, when they come into my office, some of you have come there, you've sat down at my desk and you've fallen off because I have 2 soccer balls sitting there on my desk and they're annoying and okay. When I have a student come and talk to me, sometimes they just like talk. Nothing is going to happen, so I play catch with them. Okay, just catch in the backyard. As you're doing movement, then you begin having a conversation. And they just start talking because we're doing that. I know some families that go old school and say, we're going to play a board game for 30 minutes. Okay, do a thing together. Okay, not sit and talk like, now's our talk time. Go. Okay, you're going to get very little. Some of you do a good job of trapping your children in a car because you continue to move them from one event to the other, and you've got them there. But then you have to have this thing put away to make that. Okay. But those are things that build up huge capital. So when I come back to you next year and I give you the presentation on sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which is I've never lost a parent's attention when I've done that before. I've never had a group of parents smile at me during that conversation either. But that is one where you build up that relationship capital. That's where stuff can happen. So,
Martha has a question.
Oh, yes.
I was going to say, because I can totally relate to what you're saying, and they don't want to talk about themselves really. Because it's like they just want to talk about their friends, globally speaking. And so I always have to, whatever, if I ask the question, it's like, don't social work me, like you're my mom. But so what I found is if I've had a stressful day and like I'm like this in the car, I've said like, I'm so frustrated, I can't believe, blah, 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 whatever. And then they pipe in and they might start talking and, solving and giving advice, and it takes it away from them. And that was not planned, because if I planned but it just did open up, and that maybe happened 2 or 3 times, but it just opened up me to think about taking it off of them too. And kids are smart, and they can help solve too. And so I think like sharing with them, not like, well, my day is I went to this meeting, blah, 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 but like emotionally if something went great or something didn't go great, and like kind of just throwing that out in the car or wherever you are, and see what happens from there.
And-
Yeah, I think
And
that's a
remember,
great suggestion.
developmentally, it is appropriate and typical that they'll be pushing away in order to establish independence, while at the same time wishing that you weren't away and you were close. Okay, that is just the nature of the beast.
We get a lot of, I can't wait to get out of this house. And she says, Mom, could you help me color my hair?
Right, exactly.
Like, that happened on Sunday.
And if I can have some of you hold out to your kids, 22, you become wise and meaningful again. Just hang in there. A few things. Ooh. There are sometimes, and I clipped the article for you to see, that we must help them to manage the bumps and endure. And for teachers, we sometimes, I use it, this kid's upset. Is it Kleenex or is it crisis? Because if it's Kleenex, hand them a Kleenex, let them step in the hall, come back in, and then let's continue, because that's okay. Sometimes, I think fathers have difficulty seeing their daughters cry, mothers have difficulty seeing their sons. That seems to be where I get the most. Parents up in here, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters less. But that's where people, it's okay if they're upset. Now you go with if they stay upset, if it goes very deep, if it's frequent, that's an issue you need to reach out. But that's an okay thing when it happens from time to time. If you feel like it keeps on happening, then we have to look at some of the other causes. Now there's been a huge, and this is a group I've run for current 11th graders. A friend of mine did this research for people to be resilient. This is what makes you stronger to battle the things of life. This is a full session, so I'm going to collapse down her dissertation and everything into like 2 minutes. But we have found that if you build these things in your life, regardless of what the thing is coming at you, I almost don't like to run problem groups anymore. I don't run an addiction group and I can't come to school group and grief group and that, because then it's the problem is the group, rather than let's learn resiliency and get a mixture of these things there and have the conversations from good healthy practices. Goal setting, problem solving, emotional knowledge. We talked about I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm stressed. Stressed, I know what stress means. Okay, and they need other words to describe. I'm frustrated, I'm overloaded, I'm worried, I'm concerned. To be able to truly push that out and get some help with that. Outside activities, I've had my athletes a lot of time when they are getting into a stressful crunch and it's no longer in season, and they'll start spending all this time like studying and worrying. I say, when's the last time you worked out? Okay, because that was your source of strength when you were in swim season, but now it's not. What's going on? And there's this one student, I don't know why he believed me, but he did. I say, when you get home, okay, after you change and have your snack, you put on your running shoes, and I want you to run away from the house for 15 minutes and turn around and run back to the house for 15 minutes. And he did that like 3 times a week. And he was an overloaded, can't handle all this. He found out he actually lowered his stress and became more efficient when he was using that particular time because they built in. For some of it, it's music. For some of them, it is playing with the dog. I mean, they have their thing that they need, and we have to make sure that they keep that in there because that is critically important. So again, these are ones we could certainly cover over much more deeply, but this is what makes a child and a human being resilient. So you have to invite us out to do the resiliency one also. So
Okay,
yes.
so some tips. Take away their devices at night to ensure that they can sleep. This one I do. Like just you're turning your phone in. 10 o'clock, most adolescents have a hard time getting to sleep much before then because they just can't quite wind down. But a good way to wind down in your room with no lit devices is like read a book, whatever, and just let yourself go to sleep. Take walks to talk, because that helps you and your kids lower your stress. Provide them with nutritious foods. Pretty much a teenager will eat anything you put in front of them. So just slice something up that's actually decent and throw it out there and they'll probably eat it. Encourage outside pursuits like sports, clubs, friends, arts. Help them develop a vocabulary. So if they are saying, I'm stressed. Yeah, but what is it actually? Are you afraid? Are you resentful? Are you feeling frustrated? What is it that you're trying to talk about? And then also to gauge the intensity of their feelings. It can't all be either here or here. You know, just helping them figure out like, how serious is this? Like what
I'd have
level
to
of
do it on a
intensity?
scale of 1 to 10, and you can't put 5 as an answer.
Yes,
Okay, and that forces it down or an up, because then you can gauge it. I am so stressed. Well, you're at a, I always make 1, because I have to do it on their fingers. 1 is like your middle finger, but don't do that, that's really bad. 10 is, I'm at Disney, life is wonderful, things are great. And then we can talk about later, where are you now, as opposed to,
Yep.
I'm stressed, but I'm only at a 6, and last week I was at a 3. And they
Yep.
go, well, that's cool.
that's progress. I use this technique with my 11-year-old. She's a perfectionist, and she cares about math tests and milestones and, whatever. And she gets herself all ramped up and sometimes has tears worrying about it. And I'll say to her, like, let's predict how bad it's gonna be when you go in to take your milestone. And she'll say, I think it's gonna be a 7. And I'm like, I predict it's gonna be a 4. And we pinky promise, tomorrow night we'll meet here again, and you're gonna have to tell me for real, don't make it up. Was it a 4, was it a 7, was it a 3, whatever. But just that act of like, we're gonna gauge it and we're gonna look into it, whatever, it really just kind of helps her reframe it and just brings it down. And the next night we meet, or, and she says, well, it was a 5. I'm like, really? I bet it was a 4, and then we joke about it, but it's really helped her to just kind of like put a number on something and put it into perspective. Help set specific times to talk about school. This is one of Ken's big tips. Set a time once a week. This is when we're going to sit for 30 minutes, 45 minutes and talk everything about school. And the rest of the time, maybe not.
That saves your family.
So those who have tried this technique, they know you know. This is the time. We're going to look at Manage Back, we're going to look at your little calendar, we're going to talk about what's coming up, we're going to talk about college applications, depending on where your child is in the whole routine. But just kind of protecting that time lets you relax and know like, oh, we're going to talk about it. And it lets them relax because they know they're going to talk about it, but they don't have to worry about it the rest of the time. So you both kind of get what you want. Helping your child identify their strengths, and encourage, like I said earlier, face-to-face friendships. Like actually encourage your kids to go out and be with other people. I think that's really important.
So, how stressed are you right now? On a scale of 1 to 10. 1, I'm freaked out. Why did I come here? You took me in. Now it's 2 of the bad. Or 10, I am actually perfect. I have no stress. I'd like to see you show me with your fingers, as I tell the students, if 1 is your answer, you can't give me the middle finger. Okay? So 1, really bad. 10 here, you can't give me 5. That's a weenie. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's very good. Now, remember this. But I would suggest, of all the things we've said, and we're going to send you this, start off, don't become stressed about stress.
Right.
Okay, choose 1 or 2, and where do I want to begin? The most bang for my buck, or the most doable. And then we can build on that. I will say, just because I'm a human being and I know all these things I talk about them not doing, I have to battle most of those things myself. Yep. Okay, and so I have to always, is a lot of this, are they reflecting what they're seeing in me, or am I projecting on them that concern? Is it my stuff, or is it their stuff? And figuring that out is oftentimes a lot for reducing the stress issue going on with the children. And then contact teacher, the counselor, contact us. If you said, I've tried this, or I need some support on this, so we can guide you to that next step.
Yep.
And mainly, that wasn't the wrong button, there. And mainly, if you forget everything else, bottom line, talk with your child. Okay.
The end.
If they don't listen, talk to your child.
We will be putting their PowerPoint up on the DPN website and the DPI website.
And there's an appendix here with some articles if you want to, there's articles to read. We've given you a copy of the feelings wheel and different things there that you can look at.
And Joel will be posting this up on YouTube fairly soon. Yeah, they're going, ooh, but thank y'all for letting us do that.
Of course.
It does help some folks. If you haven't done your evaluations, please make sure you drop those at that table or this one. I think they prefer
Yeah,
to
if you
go out
read the
to
red and
school.
green,